Now, there was so much to talk about last week that we have asked Governor John Carney to stick around for another session here on First. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
You know, I want to talk about health care. So let's start with what's going on in Washington and sort of if things play out the way they're being proposed, what could that mean for Delaware down the road?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that worries me, and I think most governors across the country, is significant cuts to Medicaid. I look at it, the state of Delaware's own budget. We spend about $800 million out of a $4.1 billion budget on Medicaid. And remember, there's another $800 million because it's basically a 50-50 split that comes from the federal government. A little bit more because there were incentives in the Affordable Care Act for states to expand their Medicaid populations, which is what we did here in the state of Delaware. I think it's also important for people to think about and remember who Medicaid covers. Most people think it's just for health care services for low-income families. It is that, about 53 to 55%. But it also includes services for people with disabilities, about 33%. And then it includes the rest, somewhere around 12%, which is long-term care for people who've exhausted all their assets and then they have to go on Medicaid. So it's a combination of payments for low-income families, people with disabilities, and people in long-term care facilities. So when the federal government cuts the cost share with states, it's going to require the states to either do something differently, deliver less services, or not reimburse services that are currently being provided. And by the way, I would accept greater flexibility to run more efficiently in Medicaid here in the state of Delaware. But just cutting it tens of billions of dollars over the next 10 years is just not going to be good at the local level, at the state level. And that's what worries me the most, and I think most governors.
Unemployment is down nationwide. It has been low in Delaware for a while, and lower longer than the national trend.
Yeah.
But the perception is still that we're not where we were, or the economy is still weak. What do you attribute to that?
Yeah, to me it's because things have changed so dramatically in our state. You know, I've spent most of my life here. I was born in Claymont. Went away to college for a while and came back. But you know, we relied on large corporations for a large percentage of the jobs. I mean, DuPont at one time had, I don't know, 30 or 40,000 employees in our state. They had 4 or 5 office buildings in downtown Wilmington with executives and business folks making good salaries. None of those employees are there now. Those buildings have all been sold off. Now there are different employees. A lot of the people in the neighborhood I grew up in worked in the industrial complex along the Delaware River up into southeastern Pennsylvania. I lived up in Claymont. There was a big plant in Seaford, a DuPont plant there. There's just these large employers. There was a Chrysler plant in Newark and a General Motors plant outside of Wilmington. And they were big employers that provided incomes that supported middle-class families, right? So many of those jobs are gone, and long-term Delawareans know it, and it makes them nervous about where the future is. Where are my kids going to work? And so we know that our economy is much more a small business, innovation, startup economy than it was before. And we're in the process of adapting to that. That's why we presented legislation to create a public-private partnership around the economic development effort to try to be more on the cutting edge.
That's why you eliminated DEDO?
DEDO, well, we changed it. We didn't
Okay.
eliminate it, and we kept some of those traditional Main Street small business functions within the Department of State, and then we're standing up an agency that would be a partnership with the private sector to try to stay more competitive. That's where we're going to certainly strengthen our economy and create more jobs, as well as address some of the fiscal problems that we have in the state.
So then how would that attract business to the state? Or
So some of it's growing your own.
Right.
Like the University of Delaware, Delaware State University have to be bigger drivers of economic development. And already we've partnered with the University of Delaware with innovation space out at the old DuPont experimental station, with DuPont, which is merging with Dow and then splitting off into 3 separate companies, with the University of Delaware and the state of Delaware, to help cultivate, you know, new business ideas, innovation with lab space out there. Look, you only need, you know, a few Insights of the world, which is a company now that's growing in Delaware. They got about 500 people there on Augustine Cutoff, and they're building, expanding that facility for another 500. That's 1,000 employees. That's the kind of thing that we hope to cultivate, with this startup space.
Time's winding down, but I want to hit up a couple of things. So legislation was passed to amend the Coastal Zone Act in an effort to bring new heavy industry to the state. Have we had any nibbles so far, or is it too soon?
So it is a little too soon, but we were all aware of one of the sites that, and by the way, the amendment to the coastal zone really only dealt with 2% of the overall land in the coastal zone, 14 properties, one of which was the old General Chemical site in Claymont. My next door neighbor worked at that site back in the day, which was completely unutilized and couldn't be put into really productive industrial use because it was not grandfathered in and it had been abandoned for that use. So this will open that up to additional development. There's a lot of development happening on the other side, industrial development on the other side of the state line in Marcus Hook. And it's just kind of a natural carryover to a property that's not far on this side of the line. And the whole purpose is to create the kind of jobs that we were talking about just a minute ago that people can rely on for a good middle class salary.
I want to go over to Wilmington now and then start with education. You had just announced this new Office of Improvement and Innovation within the Department of Education. What do you hope to accomplish through that office?
So we need to change what's happening in classrooms, educating kids that are growing up in the city of Wilmington, most of which, after the Neighborhood Schools Act passed, go to elementary school in the city. And they're overwhelmingly low-income minority student populations. And we just need to do a better job because they're not reaching third grade with the appropriate reading competency. And if you can't read by third grade, you're not going to be able to learn, read to learn in the rest of your academic career. And that kind of academic failure leads to other kinds of failures in our communities, and we need to strengthen our communities by making what's happening in those schools better and giving those kids better educational opportunities.
Is this office just another name, though, for the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission?
No, this is, there is a lot of really good recommendations that the Wilmington Educational Improvement Commission, so-called WEIC, came up with. This is actually, and those things they're systemic, and we're working on those as well in terms of where the district lines are and all of that. But we actually have to change what happens in the classrooms to better prepare teachers and other educational personnel to address some of the unique problems that the poor kids that come from these neighborhoods are experiencing. Trauma-based approach to this. We need to find a better trajectory as they move from middle school and into high school. And this office will focus on that, not just for the city of Wilmington, but for low-income minority kids up and down our state. We have, I was in a school in the Seaford School District earlier this year, Frederick Douglass. They've really done amazing things, and they've had real improvements in the achievement of those students. And we need to do the same for kids growing up in Wilmington and in other poor areas of our state.
Okay, Governor Carney, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Good to see you as always.
Good to be here.